Hey everybody, this is me, the Undead Viking. I'm going to have a little bit of a RPG Musings blog entry for you here today. The reason for this is, one, it's been something that I've wanted to talk about for a little while, and two, I recently underwent laser eye correction surgery, which is one of the reasons why you don't see me wearing glasses right now. I was supposed to have LASIK, which is supposed to have really quick turnaround as far as the eyes healing and your eyes getting back to normal. But I ended up having to get PRK which is another type. You can Google it if you like. I'm not going to go too much into this. Basically, my eyes were too flat, so they couldn't do, with LASIK, they actually cut a flap open. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. They cut a flap open on your eye, and then they correct your vision, and then they put the flap back down. Whereas with PRK, what they do is they actually just kind of like do they grind down, once again, they grind down your eye, like give it a scrape basically to shape it so you can see. The good thing about PRK is that, it is, most surgeons prefer it. They think they get better results than LASIK. As a matter of fact, like, the military won't use LASIK. If you get eye correction surgery and you're in the military, you get PRK. The bad thing about PRK is that, like, you kind of go through this roller coaster of sight. So, like, a couple of days ago, I had crystal clear, really good vision, and now I'm kind of regressing, and that's normal. It's like you kind of ping pong back and forth, and it takes longer for it to heal. So, I've been having trouble. I usually try to get a lot more content out. I've got a lot of RPG reviews out. I got a lot of Kickstarter videos I want to do. But as far as like moving the small pieces and adjusting the board, I haven't felt really comfortable in doing a video for a while. And so I envision, like, this next week, it's supposed to, really start coming back for me, and I'm going to get a lot of stuff done then. So I apologize that I haven't really been churning out the stuff lately, but this is a video that I didn't really need a lot of being able to see perfectly that I could talk about. So, D&D, role-playing games in general. And this is mostly focusing on the D&D aspect of it, but you can, and by that I mean fantasy role-playing games, and Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder in particular. Now these are things that I think about a lot. So I'm gonna kind of waffle back and forth, and as I do, but I'm gonna try to get to the point, and make sure that you understand why I think this is important. So the word is Versimilitude, and if you look up, I think, like, the technical Webster's dictionary is the trait of something feeling real, right? All right, so. The idea of being adventurers and going into the woods or the caves or whatever and finding goblins and orcs and trolls and killing them and getting their treasure and then coming back with said treasure is, it's obviously a fantasy trope. It doesn't really exist. However, you can try to make it so it feels real. Like, your world has a feel to it, has an actuality to it. Now, if you don't want to do that and you just want to have fun, like having battles and doing whatever, and who really cares of whether or not the campaign feels like it's a real existing, breathing world, then, and because it's a lot of work, what I'm going to describe to you here, then that's fine. I mean, and I know lots of groups that have no trouble playing their campaigns and having a blast doing it. But if you are a game master or players that kind of yearn for that kind of, like, substance, I guess, and that doesn't mean that, like, either way is better or worse. If you want something, these are some of the things I've learned that are really important, and in my opinion, as far as when you are playing role-playing games and you're playing D&D. So I will fully admit right now that like, when 3rd edition came out and 3.5 and Pathfinder, when I was playing a lot of that, I fell readily into the whole process of having that big battle, having the grid out, having the miniatures out, everybody moving, I'm going to move, this many steps, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do that, we're going to have these attacks, and what have you. That's a lot of fun. There's something about having a tactical combat and having that, it's just very enjoyable. Probably one of the reasons why I'm really enjoying playing like Warhammer, Age of Sigmar. My daughter and I have been playing a lot of that. So there's something fun about moving things on a battle and doing those. But one of the problems with that, and this isn't everybody, this is just something I've discovered, and what I think happens is that the battles become the focal point, right? Having your miniatures out there, moving them about the board, having being able to see the battle, seeing where everybody is, instead of the theater of mind combat that if you played a lot of old school D&D, that was what you did, right? You just, if you wanted to know where something was, the DM just told you, well, can I get to the hill giant and attack him this round? Yeah, you can. But you won't be able to do multiple attacks when you get there. And it was just something like you played it fast and loose, and you got to the point. Now, when you put the miniatures out, and it's like, okay, we're gonna have a combat. Okay, well, it's like there was never a combat where you had two kobolds, right? It was like, okay, get everybody out, get those two kobolds out. Okay, fight. Maybe you did, but I mean, it added this process or whatever of having to get through that, and it was. For lack of a better term, it was one of those things where it was like, it kind of lended itself, at least for me, into making sure the combats were more substantial, right? Instead of two kobolds, it was two kobolds and their bugbear boss, along with a warg that they kept. Things like that, right? You just made it bigger because of the fact that you're going through the whole process of putting that battle out there. And what a lot of people got into was this mentality of just go into a room, having the battle, rest, get your stuff back, go to the next room, have your battle, rest, get your stuff back, and you would just go through the dungeon like that. And we fell into that. We did that, and we didn't have any problem with it either, because we were having a lot of fun running all those combats. I mean, just once again, the tactical combat of being able to choose your attacks and choose where you're going and doing those things. It was a lot of fun. But somewhere along the way, we just kind of grew out of it, right? And that's why this last campaign, which is almost over that I'm done, we didn't ever do anything other than Theater of the Mind. Now, it took me a while to kind of break my players of that mentality, and yes, we did have consternation at times, especially anybody who's doing distance attacks. They're like, well, I should be able to do this, and I was like, well, you can't, just because I'm deciding at this point that you just don't have the right distance, or you can't get all of the orcs in the Cone of Cold, things like that. And and maybe I did it wrong, and I'll fully admit that maybe I didn't do the best job when I was DMing that, but I just, combats didn't become we need to rest kind of thing at all. It was one of those things where it was combats were quick, they were fluid, and yes, there were still some huge combats that were happening, and there's one big one coming up, obviously, but we didn't have situations where you were bogged down, right? And so there were great moments of role playing and the players interacting and doing things. And I'll talk a little bit more when I am actually getting ready to play again. I'm going to talk a little bit about role playing. I'm going to walk through my character concept and my character creation. We're going to kind of live through that, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So, but regardless, the point of this is that you want to have, in my opinion, if you have a campaign with Versimilitude, meaning that the world seems to breathe on its own, that sort of thing. It matters. And in my campaign, I tried to keep track of everything that was going on at any given time. If the players decided to wander off and go into the swamps and check out what the lizardmen were doing, the rest of the world didn't stop and wait for them to come back, right? I would decide, okay, well, if they're doing this, then these people who are working behind the scenes against the players, they get this done. Maybe they go and do this. Maybe they go and talk to this person. Other adventuring parties would go and investigate the leads that they knew about, that the players also knew about, but and maybe they'd have the battles, and I would figure out what would happen in those battles and things like that. Maybe they get that treasure. There was a thing where they never like, I forget what it was, but the players never went to go into this one area. And in there, I determined that there was this, like, very, very powerful sword that was in there. And sure enough, one of these NPCs, later on, that, they kind of have a, sort of good relationship with, got that sword, and they're like, and that person has that sword and carries it around. They're very envious of that sword. They wish they had it, but I just determined that, since they didn't go and slay that monster, they didn't get, the stuff from that loot, right? So there's stuff like that where I tried to make sure. Now there's a lot of ways you can make verisimilitude, real, and a lot of them are really basic. I believe in having, keeping track of time. Keeping track of time is something that, that a lot of people don't want to bother with. But, have a calendar. And you don't have to, come up with different... I actually don't think you should have different names for the months of the calendar, just basically because the players aren't going to remember those. So use our calendar. Use our weeks. Have each day have 24 hours in it. But... but determine where they are and what kind of seasons there are and things like that. And so as the campaign progresses and as they travel, oh, we're going to travel from this town to that town. Well, figure out how long it's going to take them. Okay, it's going to take you 9 days to get there. Now, you can determine that they're part of some big wagon train. They don't have to worry about getting hurt or getting ambushed or anything like that. But that travel should be an adventure in and of itself. But but that's 9 days, right? Take those 9 days off. And maybe you don't have, big, giant things going on in the background, but having, the seasons change. Okay, it's summer, and, now it's going to be fall, and so it's going to be colder at night. You're going to have to start a fire. Lots of times people, oh, we're not going to have a fire tonight out because we don't want to attract people to where we are. Oh, it's getting cold. Well, it's just to be comfortable, you're going to need a fire, right? And if it gets to be winter, and you're in a climate where there's going to be snow, then have that happen as well. So there's all kinds of things like that that you can adjust for, and you can determine weather. And weather is another way you can really make people feel like there's something. Lots of times I'll just say, it's I'll determine that oh, there's a storm coming, and it's just one of those things where it's having the players looking off in the distance and they can see the rolling clouds and the lightning and what have you. That's something that, once again, it adds to the world. It adds to what's going on. Now, maybe that doesn't really affect them one way or the other, but knowing fully well that when they go into the cave and they're going to be doing battle, when they leave, it's going to be pouring rain outside, maybe it'll add something to it. Who knows? But it's just something else that makes it happen and makes it real. So the big thing is, like I said, keep track of time. Know seasons. Know the time of day. Here's something that I learned, actually, fairly recently. This is a cool idea. Now, this is going to seem silly because I'm holding poker chips, and I hold poker chips. But this is 6 poker chips. And I read this in a book that I'm going to actually do a review of, a campaign book that I'm going to do a review of here in a little bit. This is 6 chips, right? And each one of these chips represents 4 hours. And what they said was, have 2 black chips, which is the top 2. Have 2 red chips, and then have 2 yellow or white chips in the middle. And what this does is this represents a day. And so if you want to keep track of how many hours, if the hours are important, you just have this stack. And so this is from midnight until 4 a.m. And so if nothing's going on, you just take that and put it aside. So at dawn, you use a red chip, and that's from 4 to 8. And now from 8 to 12, it's light. From 12 to 4, it's light. And now we're going to go to dusk, 4 to 8, and then once again 8 to midnight. And so having these out there, and you can just say, okay, and you just move them off to the side. Here, you can't really see that, I apologize. But having them out there on the table, and you can just say, oh, and the player's going to see the top chip, and they're going to say, okay, well, it's dusk. Or you're going to have this, and you're going to say, oh, well, it's the middle of the day. There's so many times when I've been playing where, we just didn't keep track of time, and we didn't have an idea of, what time is it? And so if you just have something like that and you're keeping track of, just have an idea of how long things are going to take when they do them. All right. So try to keep track of that. And then if you have a big campaign world, have things happening in the campaign world that don't have, that happen beyond the players, right? All right, cool. So here is the last thing about verisimilitude that I think is really important, and this comes right down to dungeons and where they're going to go and investigate. Lots of times you'll have a small dungeon, like 4 or 5 rooms. It's whatever, the troll cave. They're going to go in, they're going to wipe it out, they're going to leave. Probably never go back ever again. If they ever do go back, it's probably a good idea that like you think of, something else might have moved in there, right? You cleaned it out. It's a pretty cool cave. Something else might move in there. So if they go back there, maybe have something there. This is more for when they're exploring a dungeon, a big dungeon with multiple levels, 20, 30, maybe 40 rooms. It's going to take them several sessions to get through. They're going to probably leave the dungeon at some point and then come back, right? They're going to have too much stuff, and I'm a big fan of keeping track of encumbrance too. Don't just let them have 17,000 gold pieces. That's a lot. That's a lot of weight. Plus, they're going to be making a lot of noise, jingle, 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 as they move. So, keep them. And that's. I'll talk about this in another one of these. I think things that like bags of holding or like any kind of movement spell or anything like that really breaks a campaign in a lot of ways. And I'll talk about that in a little bit with another one of these in the future. But anyway, regardless. Don't let them carry a ton of stuff, right? You just let them realize that, like, oh, well, you're carrying you can barely walk. You've got like, you've got 17,000 gold pieces, you've got all these objects of art, you've got these gems, you got everything. All of you are weighed down. You need to get this stuff back, or whatever. And I would never give that much, gold out in a campaign, but you get what I'm saying. Keep track of weight. It's important. But the other thing is that when they're traveling through the dungeon, one of the things that I think people have learned is that with all of these different checks that we do, like, and I've talked about like skill checks and things like that, and I have a problem with those. But like, if you are playing a Pathfinder or like 5th edition, something like that, and you have like, oh, I have search, I have this, that stuff takes time. And make sure they recognize that takes time. And roll for wandering monsters. And this is really, really important. I remember when I played D&D way back in the day, like something would happen and you would roll a d6, like basically for every like hour they were in the dungeon, you roll a d6. And if you got a 1, they ran into wandering monsters. Just like, monsters don't just sit in their rooms waiting for things to come along and kill them. They get up, they move around, they go to the bathroom, they go hunting, they go get water, all kinds of things. And the chances of them running into something, just like happening upon the adventurers is, it's there. Also, when the players decide, oh, we're going to just stop in this room and we're going to spend a good hour like searching every single nook and cranny of this room, you owe it to them to roll for a wandering monster check when that happens, because of the fact that like it isn't, that should be a risk reward type situation. They shouldn't just say, I'm going to search, okay, roll the die, see if it works. No. They they need to know there could be a roving band of bugbears that are just like happening and just happen upon the players. Now, are they a serious threat? Maybe, maybe not, depending upon the health of the players. But that's a decision they have to make. Of, we can't just sit around here. We're half dead. The cleric's got 1 healing spell left. It's like, we need to keep moving. We can't just stay here and randomly search. Oh, and especially like, hey, we're gonna break this door down, or I'm gonna like take this hammer and I'm gonna smash this chest open. Those things make noise, and if you're gonna make a bunch of noise and you're in the dungeon and the noises are bouncing off the walls, something's gonna come and find out what the hell's going on. And you need to make the players recognize that, like, when they're in a dungeon, they're not safe, right? And it isn't something where they can just take their time and, oh, we're just going to stop here and we're going to sleep. No, you're not going to stop here and sleep. Because if you stop here and sleep, then, you know what, the spectral horde that comes out at night is going to happen upon you while you're all asleep, and none of you got your spells back, and it's going to kill you. So you need to you have to make them fear the dungeon. Now this is all, once again, this is that making things feel real. And the same thing goes for if they clean out a dungeon, like they clean out like 6 or 7 rooms of a dungeon, right? Let's say like half of the top floor, and they decide we got to leave. Okay, so they leave and they go back to town. And then they spend 6 days there. Oh, well, I want to trade this in. I want to get my armor fixed. And you know what? See if the enchanter can make my short sword a +1 short sword. I want to do this. I want to do that. I got these people I got to check on. All of a sudden, it's like a week later, and they're heading back to the dungeon. Those rooms aren't going to be empty anymore. They're going to have things in it. And the quicker your players realize that, and they recognize that, is one of those things where it's like, then they start realizing that their actions and the time they take to do those things are actually having an effect, and they're actually making things more difficult for them. And then they have interesting decisions as far as, like I said, risks and rewards, like things that they want to do and whether or not it is safe to do them. And once again, you know, it's quite possible that your group doesn't want to do this, right? And that's cool. That's totally fine. And I've always said, play the game the way you want to play the game, and enjoy the game the way you want to enjoy the game. But I have found that if you try to make the game world more real, and you kind of draw them into it, that is when players get off their phones. That is when players stop talking about last night's episode of Star Trek or whatever, and they actually start engaging with each other as players, and actually start engaging with the GM and creating a really, really satisfying story that they're all creating together, that they'll talk about for years to come. So yeah, there you go. That's me. That's like my RPG ideas. If you have any ideas as far as how to increase versimilitude, I'm sorry, just making a campaign more real, then I'd love to hear it. And if you could post those, that'd be awesome. I apologize, as I said, for kind of the lack of content lately. Like I said, with the eyes, they're getting better, and I'm looking forward to doing a heck of a lot more. So, until next time, I'm the Undead Viking, telling you to have yourself one heck of an awesome day. All right, bye-bye.